And, well, the first story here, it's interesting. Of course, it's one of the big stories right now that has gripped the headlines and the national conversation, and that, of course, is with regards to the Brent Thomas incident. Now, yesterday, Karen and I basically, we were discussing the situation, and one of the things that, just somewhat, one of the things that came out was who was the senior government official in this situation, right? Because Karen did not think, and in hindsight, this should be true, this is reasonable. The officers involved might or should be too junior to make the call to go to another country to set all of this up, right? Just as you asked, where is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, right, in all of this? So that's a pertinent question. But we figured somebody senior in government had to have made the call. Well, the Prime Minister is asking the Commissioner of Police, apparently, about the situation. So this question, I think, is actually could be bad or could indicate something bad in two ways.
If you think too much into it, because the Prime Minister might also be looking at another avenue where publicly he has to express his distance from a case. But internally, we will never entirely know. But
the thing is this the type of case that Cabinet should be unaware of? Because the assumption then is if he has to ask Commissioner of Police, it seems as though Cabinet is unaware of it.
Cabinet does not necessarily have to be aware of it, but there are members of Cabinet who should be aware. For example, I still believe that the Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs should have been involved, given the fact that it's an RSS plane that was used, or at least the fact that it was suggested that the RSS plane was used. The Minister of National Security, and by extension the Prime Minister, who often uses his role or title as head of the National Security Council in whatever beneficial manner he supposedly uses it in. But I think another interesting twist in this is that the Attorney General of Barbados,
yes,
well, he's actually now called for a report from the Commissioner of Police in Barbados, that is Mr. Richard Boyce, Commissioner of Police Richard Boyce. The questions that I have is it now that also Barbados was unaware, or is it also part of the narrative where we have to seem as though we're unaware? I do not think for any moment that an RSS plane or a Defence Force plane could just land in Barbados without Barbados authorities not knowing.
Well, more importantly, so is the police of one jurisdiction just going to willingly say, sure, we're going to arrest somebody for you? What are the merits of the case? Is this proven? How was that exchange? Because it is, part of the ruling acknowledges that there were Barbadian police officers that were there. I believe they were the ones that actually did the arrest. So at least that
because
level of procedure was not...
Officers can't carry out an arrest on Barbados jurisdiction.
Right. So at least that line was not crossed. But the fact of the matter is there was collaboration between the two police services. But how is it that, well, at least in one country, the AG is not aware of what happened, and in another country, the Prime Minister is having to ask the head of the National Security Council? How, it's funny what he does not know when he does not need to know it. But you have a situation where the elected officials are asking, well, what exactly happened? Because we're not looking very good right now, and we need to be able to answer the public. And that alone, even if we take it on face value, Ketan, and we totally believe them, that's not a good look.
You see, the thing is whether or not we believe the Prime Minister for his word that he was unaware, and he's now questioning the Commissioner of Police as to exactly what happened. Whether or not we take it at face value and believe the Prime Minister, I guess it's up to the individual. I think that I do not believe that the Prime Minister would be unaware of it. I honestly don't think so.
I think the problem for the Prime Minister, and again, this is why I always say transparency works for you. Of course, in this case, there isn't much transparency, so you're trying to come after the fact and claim that you're unaware. The problem for the Prime Minister is, let's assume that's true. Then, Mr. Prime Minister, you mean to tell me that such a thing is going to happen and they're not going to tell you about it?
But then no, furthermore, because again, it's the RSS plane that Stuart Young said. So therefore, you would assume that the Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs would have been aware. And by extension, the Prime Minister. You remember all these ministers report back to the Prime Minister.
I understand. What my point is, the Prime Minister's claim, if he wants us to believe his claim to be 100% accurate, then it causes further questions that have to be asked about the fact that you have essentially lost control over an international situation.
Now, furthermore, the next part of it is whether or not this could lead to an unfortunate diplomatic incident between Barbados and Trinidad and Tobago, especially now that the Attorney General of Barbados has to get involved in this questioning, what the hell happened in my country? This entire thing has me rather, skeptical. The Minister of National Security in his press conference did not seek to address anything. I've not gotten any clarifications or answers.
I've seen one report that said that the Minister of National Security is denying involvement or knowledge about the situation in Barbados. But as far as my memory is concerned, and maybe I'm wrong, that press conference did not reference the situation in Barbados at all. So his claims that the government is not involved can't directly be attributed to that.
The other side of it, of course, is the police involvement here in TNT. The police could collaborate with the Bajan police force. But the next part is, who precisely gave these orders? I think that is crucial because the 3 officers who were on that plane to Barbados and actually brought Mr. Thomas back to Trinidad, and it's being claimed it's unlawful how he was brought back. In fact, it's even being referred to as an abduction, right? Who was the senior officer or officers who gave such orders? On what grounds did they give such orders? On what grounds was Barbados police force allowed to carry out this arrest? Who were the authorities that were informed? I'm repeating myself as I did two days ago because none of what has been said thus far by those in authority addresses any of these concerns.
The thing is, there needs to be a senior government official had to make the call. It couldn't be junior police officer that makes such a call, right? And it probably, in all honesty, should be someone who is not just in the police force, because the police, again, does not have jurisdiction outside of our own borders. So it goes back to the fact, if it is that both governments are just trying to kind of cover up their knowledge of the situation, then there won't really be much of a diplomatic fallout. However, I kind of find it hard to believe that it would be kind of silly for both governments to say, well, you know what, let's not just come out and say that everything was done correctly. We collaborated properly and what have you.
No, because there's always going to be a fall guy. Regardless of who is involved, there's always going to be a fall guy. We just don't know who that fall guy is as yet. And, apart from all this, the other point is that when you take a look at this and when you take a look at the reports that are being read, though this is something that was carried out on a foreign jurisdiction, but the Trans-Tobago Police Service was involved. As much as we have media ambassadors making their rounds to every single media house to bring clarification and to also raise awareness and raise public trust and confidence in the Trans-Tobago Police Service, it is instances and operations like these that make you even more skeptical about the TTPS and their operations.
Because could you reasonably leave somebody senior, an elected official was not involved? So could you reasonably be confident of that?
So that brings me to my question. And I don't know all the facts of the matter, and we may never know all the facts of the matter, especially for those who are involved. Now, it seems as though somebody had a serious disagreement with Mr. Thomas, and they were out to get Mr. Thomas. Now, that opinion could change. That's an opinion, it's not a fact. It's an opinion, and that is subject to change based off of the findings within the court systems.
Could this person you're hypothesizing about be a police officer, and maybe it is a case where a police officer went rogue and kind of pushed things too far?
That's a lot of power that this police officer has, especially if the RSS regional security systems were involved.
And the Minister of Energy seemed to be quite aware of the situation up until that point.
Exactly. So the individual who was aware of all these things was Stuart Young in the Parliament before Fitzgerald Hinds held his press conference and denied any knowledge or government involvement. So isn't there a level of contradiction involved here somewhere? Isn't there? I mean, you kind of just reason. Isn't there some level of contradiction? So that's my question. Whether or not we believe these ministers and Prime Minister at face value, To what extent are police investigations in Trinidad and Tobago influenced or swayed by the involvement of politicians and politics?
I think this situation is ultimately very unfortunate, but and there will be more about this, folks. I'm not saying that you know, let's just not believe them and it's all bad. The problem is it's not adding up, and at the end of the day, it goes back to, I think serious questions need to be asked with regards to the policy on what is told to the public, because it seems as though, again, or at least maybe they've realized it's not going to work this time, but it seems as though what they wanted to do was basically say, well, this is an ongoing investigation on a court matter, so we can't talk about it. But more and more, that's not acceptable, because the situation does not seem right, and we can't just, there's no more benefit of the doubt to give anymore, because you've asked that of the public too many times.